For decades, Sarah had lived with an emptiness she could never escape. She had watched the years pass over her face. She had watched the strength of her youth disappear. She had watched younger women hold their newborn children while her own arms remained empty. There had been prayers, there had been hope, there had been disappointment, and eventually there had been silence. Now Sarah was 90 years old. Her hair had turned gray, her body had grown weak. Every natural possibility of motherhood had vanished long ago. Yet on this morning, beneath the warm light of the Canaanite sun, Sarah was holding a newborn child against her chest. The child breathed softly beneath the folds of linen. His tiny fingers curled around hers. His eyes opened for a moment and then closed again. Sarah looked down at him and tears filled her eyes. This was not a dream. This was not another promise spoken about some distant future. This was the child himself, the son whom God had promised, the son whom Abraham had waited for, the son whom Sarah had once believed could never exist. Sarah began to laugh, but this was not the laughter of disbelief she had once hidden inside the tent. This was the laughter of joy, the laughter of a woman who had discovered that God had not forgotten her, the laughter of someone standing inside an impossible miracle. And so she named the child Isaac. He laughs, because the God who had made the promise had finally fulfilled it. What do you do when God gives you a promise but the years keep passing? What do you do when you believe at first but nothing seems to change? What do you do when the door appears closed, the opportunity disappears, and every natural sign tells you that it is too late? Abraham and Sarah knew what it meant to wait. They had waited not for weeks or months, but for decades. They had left their homeland because God had promised to make Abraham into a great nation. They had traveled through unfamiliar lands. They had faced famine, fear, conflict, and failure. They had heard God repeat the promise again and again. Yet the one thing necessary for that promise to continue had not come. They had no son. As Abraham grew older, the promise seemed more impossible. As Sarah's body aged, hope became more painful. Eventually, both of them laughed when God declared that Sarah would give birth. But their laughter did not cancel the promise. Their weakness did not weaken God. Their delay did not mean God had abandoned his plan. And their failure to understand the timing did not change what God had determined to do.
This is the story of Isaac. It is the story of a child born when human strength had ended. It is the story of laughter transformed from doubt into joy. It is the story of a God who may allow hope to grow old, but who never allows his word to fail. Long before Isaac was born, God called a man named Abram to leave his country, his people, and his father's household. Abram did not know where the road would lead. He knew only that the God who had called him had given him a promise. God said that Abram would become a great nation. His name would be made great. Through him, all the families of the earth would be blessed. Abram obeyed. He left Haran and entered the land of Canaan with his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, his servants, and all their possessions. But there was a problem hidden inside the promise. Abram and Sarai had no children. Year after year, they lived as strangers in the land God had shown them. God promised that the land would belong to Abram's descendants, but there were no descendants. God told Abram to look toward the heavens and count the stars, if he could count them. So shall your offspring be, God declared. Abram believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Yet faith did not remove the waiting. The promise was true, but the fulfillment had not yet appeared. As time passed, Sarai tried to solve the problem through her servant Hagar. According to the customs of that world, Sarai gave Hagar to Abram so that a child might be born through her. Hagar conceived and gave birth to Ishmael. But Ishmael was not the son through whom the covenant promise would continue. Human effort had produced a child, but it had not produced the fulfillment God had spoken. 13 more years passed. Abram was now 99 years old. Then God appeared to him again. God changed Abram's name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations. He changed Sarai's name to Sarah, declaring that she would become a mother of nations and that kings would come from her. The covenant was marked through circumcision. And then God spoke the words Abraham had almost stopped expecting to hear. Sarah would bear him a son. The child would be named Isaac. God would establish his covenant with him. Abraham fell face down, and he laughed. Not because the promise was unimportant, but because it seemed beyond every possibility he understood. Could a son be born to a man 100 years old? Could Sarah give birth at 90? Abraham asked God to bless Ishmael. God promised that Ishmael would also become the father of a great nation.
But the covenant would continue through Isaac, the son Sarah would bear at the appointed time the following year. The promise had been spoken. The time had been set. Now Abraham and Sarah had to wait once more. Waiting is never measured only by the passing of time. It is measured by what happens inside the heart while time is passing. At the beginning, waiting may feel like anticipation. You imagine the day when everything will change. You speak about the future with confidence. You believe the answer may come at any moment. But when months become years, anticipation can become exhaustion. Questions begin to appear. Did I misunderstand what God said? Did I make a mistake? Has the promise changed? Has God chosen someone else? Has He forgotten me? For Abraham and Sarah, the wait had reshaped their entire lives. They had spent most of their adult years living beneath a promise that had not yet become visible. Every new season reminded them that the child had not come. Every birthday made the situation more impossible. Every delay seemed to increase the distance between what God had said and what they could see. Yet in God's purpose, the delay was not empty. God was bringing Abraham and Sarah to the end of human strength. If Isaac had been born when Abraham was still young, and Sarah was still naturally able to have children, the birth might have appeared ordinary. People might have said that the promise was fulfilled through favorable circumstances. They might have credited good timing, human planning, or natural ability. But Isaac would be born when no one could mistake the source of the miracle. His life would testify that the covenant did not depend on Abraham's power. It did not depend on Sarah's youth. It did not depend on human strategy. It depended entirely on the faithfulness of God. The long wait had made the promise seem weaker. In reality, it was preparing the moment when God's strength would be seen most clearly. The camp of Abraham rested beneath the great trees of Mamre. The land around them was dry and open. Brown hills rose in the distance. Flocks moved slowly across the fields as shepherds watched over them. Servants worked near the tents, carrying water, grinding grain, preparing food, and caring for the animals. Abraham's household had grown large. He possessed silver, gold, livestock, servants, and fighting men. Kings had met him. Nations had heard of him. He had rescued Lot from powerful armies. He had received the blessing of Melchizedek. He had spoken with God. Yet inside the largest tent lived the reminder of what he still did not have. There was no son born to Sarah. Abraham had Ishmael. He loved Ishmael. The boy had grown into his teenage years and had spent his life within Abraham's camp. But God had clearly said that Sarah herself would give birth to the covenant son. This was difficult for Abraham to understand. It was even more difficult for Sarah.
Sarah had known the pain of barrenness for most of her life. In the ancient world, children were not only loved, they were essential to the future of a household. A son carried the family name. A son inherited the property. A son protected the family line. A woman without children often lived beneath shame, pity, and questions she could not answer. Sarah had endured all of this. She had followed Abraham away from everything familiar. She had shared his wandering life. She had entered foreign lands. She had endured danger because of Abraham's fear. She had offered Hagar to him in a desperate attempt to build a family. That decision had brought conflict and bitterness into the household. Now, after all those years, God declared that Sarah would have a son. When Abraham first heard it, he fell on his face and laughed. He did not openly reject God, but his mind could not understand how such a thing could happen. Abraham had learned to believe in the power of God. Yet faith does not mean that every promise immediately feels reasonable. Faith often begins where reason has reached its limit. Abraham thought of Sarah's age. He thought of his own age. He thought of Ishmael, already alive and growing before him. "May Ishmael live under your blessing," Abraham pleaded. Perhaps Abraham believed God could bless him through the child he already had. Perhaps he thought that was the simplest answer. Ishmael existed. Ishmael was strong. Ishmael was his son. But God's promise was not based on the simplest human solution. God said, "Yes, but your wife Sarah will bear you a son." Not another servant, not another woman. Sarah, the woman whose body could no longer bear children, the woman who had waited until hope itself had become painful. She would be the mother. "You will call him Isaac," God said. The name itself carried the memory of Abraham's laughter. And God continued, "I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him." Ishmael would not be abandoned. God promised to bless him, make him fruitful, and increase his numbers greatly. 12 rulers would come from him. He would become a great nation.
But the specific covenant line, the line through which the promises concerning the nations and the future blessing of the world would continue, would pass through Isaac. Then God gave Abraham a time, not someday, not in an undefined future, at this time next year. The promise now had an appointed season. A year later, the impossible child would be in Abraham's arms. Not long after this, Abraham sat at the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. The sun stood high above the land. Work moved slowly beneath the oppressive heat. The animals rested in the shade. The camp had grown quiet. Abraham lifted his eyes and saw 3 men standing nearby. They seemed to have appeared without warning. There was something about them that immediately drew Abraham's attention. Though he was old, Abraham rose quickly from the entrance of the tent. He ran to meet them. He bowed low to the ground. "My Lord," he said, "if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant." Abraham offered them water to wash their feet. He invited them to rest beneath the tree. He offered bread so they could refresh themselves before continuing their journey. The visitors accepted. Abraham hurried into the tent and spoke to Sarah. "Quickly, prepare fine flour, knead it, and make bread." Then Abraham ran to the herd and selected a young, tender calf. He gave it to a servant who prepared it. Abraham gathered curds and milk. He placed the food before the visitors. Then he stood nearby beneath the tree while they ate. The scene appeared ordinary. Travelers had arrived. A host had welcomed them. Food had been prepared. Yet this was not an ordinary visit. The presence of God was among them. Then one of the visitors asked a question. "Where is your wife Sarah?" The question was strange. How did the visitor know her new name? How did he know who she was? Abraham answered, "She is there, in the tent." Sarah remained inside, separated from the men according to the customs of the time. But the fabric of the tent did not prevent her from hearing. Then the visitor spoke. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." Inside the tent, Sarah froze. She had heard promises before. She knew what God had told Abraham. Perhaps Abraham had repeated the words to her. Perhaps he had told her that God had changed her name and declared that she would become a mother. But hearing the promise spoken openly was different. Sarah considered her body. She considered Abraham's age. She knew that the natural cycle of childbearing had ended.
The time when women could conceive had long since passed for her. She had not merely grown older. She had crossed into a season of life where pregnancy was no longer possible. Sarah laughed to herself. Her laughter was quiet. It was hidden behind the walls of the tent. It may have been bitter. It may have been filled with sadness. It may have carried the weight of every disappointment she had endured. "After I am worn out," she thought, "and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Sarah did not believe anyone had heard her. But the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh?" The words passed through the tent. Sarah's heart began to pound. The visitor repeated her unspoken question, "Will I really have a child now that I am old?" Sarah had laughed silently, but God had heard the language of her heart. Then came the question that stands at the center of the entire story. Is anything too hard for the Lord? The question was not only for Sarah, it was for Abraham. It was for every generation that would hear the story. It was for every person who would look at an impossible situation and assume that God was limited by the same boundaries that limit human beings. Is anything too hard for the Lord? The Hebrew words carry the idea of something extraordinary, wonderful, or beyond human ability. Was Sarah's age beyond God's authority? Was Abraham's weakness greater than God's power? Could death inside the human body prevent the Creator of life from acting? The God who formed Adam from dust did not need youthful strength to create life. The God who placed the stars in the heavens did not need favorable circumstances. The God who had called Abraham from Ur was not discovering Sarah's age for the first time. He had always known how old she would be. He had always known how long they would wait. He had always known that the promise would reach the point where human ability ended. And he had chosen that moment deliberately. At the appointed time, the Lord said, "I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah became afraid. She stepped deeper into the safety of the tent. "I did not laugh," she denied. Perhaps she feared judgment. Perhaps she was ashamed that her doubt had been exposed. But the Lord answered simply, "Yes, you did laugh." God did not destroy Sarah because of her laughter. He did not remove her from the promise. He confronted her unbelief, but he remained faithful. This is one of the great mysteries of grace. God's faithfulness does not depend on the perfection of human faith. Sarah doubted. Abraham laughed. Both had made mistakes. Neither understood the timing. Yet God remained true to his word. The promise stood not because their confidence was flawless, but because God's character could not fail. The visitors departed from Abraham's camp. The heat of the day faded. Evening shadows stretched across the land. The servants cleared away the railing of the meal. The camp returned to its normal rhythm. But nothing was truly normal anymore. A time had been appointed. 1 year. Abraham and Sarah had lived through many years of uncertain waiting. Now the promise had entered its final season. Yet even a single year can feel long when the heart is watching every day. The scriptures do not describe every conversation between Abraham and Sarah during those months. They do not tell us what Sarah felt each morning. They do not record whether she began to hope immediately or whether doubt remained. They do not tell us how many times Abraham remembered the words spoken beneath the trees. But we can understand something of the tension. Sarah's body still appeared old. Abraham still looked like a man near the end of life. Nothing visible had changed when the visitors walked away. The promise had been spoken, but the evidence had not yet appeared. This is often the most difficult part of faith. There are moments when God speaks, but circumstances remain the same. The prayer has been offered, but the sickness remains. The direction has been given, but the door has not opened. The promise has been heard, but the life around you still looks unchanged. Faith must live in the space between the word and the visible result. Days passed. Abraham continued managing the camp. Sarah continued overseeing the household. She prepared food, she directed servants, she watched the flocks return in the evenings. She heard the sounds of Ishmael moving through the camp. The ordinary routines continued. Then, something began to change. At first, perhaps Sarah wondered whether she was imagining it. Her body felt different. The signs she believed she would never experience began to appear. The impossible was quietly taking shape within her. Sarah was pregnant. For a woman of 90 years, there could be no natural explanation. The news must have passed through the household with astonishment. Servants who had known Sarah for years looked at her with wonder. Women who had once pitied her now saw her carrying life. Abraham, almost 100 years old, knew that the appointed time had begun. The promise was no longer only a sentence spoken by God. It was growing inside Sarah. Month by month, the evidence became undeniable.
Her body, marked by age, now carried the covenant child. Every movement within her became a testimony. Every day of the pregnancy declared that the Creator had not lost His power. Sarah had once laughed because the promise seemed impossible. Now she may have laughed because the impossible was moving within her. But the miracle did not erase every difficulty. Pregnancy is demanding even for the young. For Sarah, it must have required extraordinary strength. There may have been fear. Would she survive the birth? Would the child live? Had they understood the promise correctly? But every concern had to return to the same foundation. God had said the child would be born. God had named him before his conception. God had declared that the covenant would continue through him. The same word that began the miracle would carry it to completion. The appointed time arrived. Sarah went into labor. The camp filled with movement. Women hurried into the tent. Water was carried. Cloths were prepared. Abraham waited outside, unable to enter, unable to help, unable to do anything except trust the God who had brought them to this moment. The hours may have felt longer than all the years before them. Sarah's cries passed through the fabric of the tent. Abraham stood beneath the same sky where God had once told him to count the stars. Those stars had represented descendants too numerous to count. But in this moment, Abraham was waiting for one child, one cry, one breath, one son. Then the sound came. A newborn child cried inside the tent. After 25 years in Canaan, after decades of barrenness, after disappointment, failure, and laughter, the promised son had been born. A woman emerged and spoke the words Abraham had waited most of his life to hear. Sarah had delivered a son. Abraham entered the tent. There was Sarah, exhausted but alive, and in her arms was the child. The child was small. He looked fragile. He did not understand the weight of the promises resting upon his life. He did not know that kings would come from his descendants. He did not know that nations would trace their history through him. He did not know that through his family, God's plan to bless the world would continue. He was simply a newborn boy, resting against the chest of his elderly mother. Abraham looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at Abraham. They both remembered the laughter. God had told them what to name the child. Isaac. He laughs. The name carried several meanings. It remembered Abraham's laughter when God first declared that Sarah would have a son.
It remembered Sarah's hidden laughter within the tent. But now it also represented the joy that filled the household. The laughter of doubt had become the laughter of fulfillment. Sarah said, "God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me." She was no longer hiding behind the tent. She was no longer denying that she had laughed. Now she openly declared that God Himself had given her a reason to rejoice. She continued, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." Who could have predicted this? Who would have looked at Sarah at 90 and imagined her nursing an infant? Who would have looked at Abraham at 100 and called him the father of a newborn child? No one. That was the point. The birth of Isaac could not be explained as an ordinary event. His existence announced that God keeps covenant. God had promised. God had waited. God had acted. And God had fulfilled every word. 8 days after Isaac's birth, Abraham circumcised him, just as God had commanded. The mark of the covenant was placed upon the child of promise. Abraham did not delay. He did not modify the command. He obeyed. The old man held his infant son and performed the sign that connected Isaac to the covenant God had established. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. The number is preserved in Scripture because it emphasizes the miracle. This was not the beginning of Abraham's natural strength. It was the end of it. Isaac was not the achievement of a powerful man. He was the gift of a faithful God. The days following Isaac's birth must have transformed Abraham's camp. The sound of an infant now came from Sarah's tent. Servants carried water for the child. Sarah, who had lived so long without children, learned the daily rhythms of motherhood. She held Isaac when he cried. She watched him sleep. She fed him. She wrapped him in cloth. She saw his eyes begin to follow movement. She listened as his first sounds filled the tent. Abraham visited constantly. The great leader, the wealthy shepherd, the warrior who had defeated kings, now bent over a small child and smiled. Every ordinary moment became extraordinary because it had once seemed impossible. Isaac's life was a visible reminder that God's timing is not the same as human timing. Abraham may have wanted the son decades earlier. Sarah certainly would have preferred motherhood in her youth. But Isaac did not come according to their preferred schedule. He came according to God's appointed time. This does not mean the years of waiting were easy. It does not mean their pain was unimportant. God did not ask them to pretend the delay had not hurt. But when Isaac arrived, they could see that the promise had never been forgotten. The child grew. He learned to sit. He learned to crawl. He took his first steps beneath the tents of Abraham's household. He began to speak. He reached the age when he no longer depended entirely on Sarah's milk. In the ancient world, the survival of a child through the earliest years was significant. Infant mortality was high. Reaching the age of weaning was a cause for celebration. So Abraham prepared a great feast on the day Isaac was weaned. Animals were prepared, bread was baked, servants arranged food. The camp filled with celebration. The child of promise had survived his earliest years. Guests may have come from nearby households. Voices and music carried across the land. People laughed with Sarah, just as she had said they would. But beneath the celebration, another conflict was developing. Ishmael was still part of Abraham's household. He was Abraham's first son. He had grown up believing that he might inherit everything. For 13 years before Isaac's birth, Ishmael had been the only child of Abraham. He had known Abraham's attention. He had received his affection. He had been circumcised with the household. God had promised to bless him. But now the entire camp seemed centered around the younger child. Isaac was called the son of promise. Isaac was the child through whom the covenant would continue. Isaac was the reason for the feast. Ishmael may have felt displaced. Sarah saw Ishmael laughing or mocking. The exact nature of his action is described briefly, but Sarah understood it as a threat. Perhaps Ishmael was ridiculing Isaac. Perhaps there was hostility in his behavior. Perhaps Sarah feared that the older boy would compete with Isaac for the inheritance. The old bitterness between Sarah and Hagar returned. Years earlier, Hagar had looked down on Sarah after becoming pregnant. Sarah had treated Hagar harshly. Hagar had fled and then returned. The birth of Isaac had not erased that painful history. Now Sarah approached Abraham. "Get rid of that slave woman and her son," she said, "for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Her words were severe. She did not call Ishmael by name. She called him the son of the slave woman. Sarah was protecting Isaac, but her demand also revealed the deep wound that had never fully healed. For Abraham, the matter was deeply distressing.
Ishmael was his son. Abraham had held him as a baby. He had watched him grow. He had circumcised him. He had once begged God, "If only Ishmael might live under your blessing." Sending Hagar and Ishmael away would tear apart his household. The joy of Isaac's feast was now overshadowed by grief. Abraham had received the promised son, but he was being asked to release the son who had been born through human planning. That night, Abraham may have struggled with Sarah's demand. He knew the hostility inside the household could not continue. Yet he could not imagine abandoning Ishmael. Then God spoke to him. "Do not be distressed about the boy and your slave woman." God did not ignore Abraham's pain. He acknowledged it. Ishmael mattered. Hagar mattered. But God told Abraham to listen to Sarah, because the covenant descendants would be counted through Isaac. This did not mean Ishmael had no future. God repeated his promise. "I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Isaac was chosen for the covenant line. Ishmael was not rejected from God's care. The purposes were different, but the compassion of God extended to both. Early the next morning, Abraham rose. Perhaps he had slept little. He took bread and a skin of water. The provisions appear painfully small for a journey into the wilderness. He placed them on Hagar's shoulder. Then he sent her away with Ishmael. The scriptures do not record a long farewell. They do not tell us what Abraham said to his son. They do not describe whether he embraced Ishmael. But the silence of the passage does not mean the moment was without emotion. Abraham loved Ishmael. Watching him walk away must have been one of the most painful experiences of his life. Hagar left the safety of the camp. Behind her were Abraham's tents, servants, wells, flocks, and protection. Before her was the wilderness of Beersheba. The land was dry and unforgiving. The sun burned overhead. Paths disappeared among the rocks. Water was difficult to find. Hagar wandered. She had once fled into the wilderness while pregnant with Ishmael. On that earlier journey, the angel of the Lord had found her beside a spring. God had told her to return. He had promised that Ishmael's descendants would be too numerous to count. Hagar had called the Lord the God who sees me. Now she was in the wilderness again.
But this time, the water was running out. The skin grew lighter. The bread disappeared. Heat weakened them. Ishmael, though older than Isaac, could not continue. The boy collapsed beneath a bush. Hagar could not bear to watch him die. She placed him in the small amount of shade the plant provided. Then she moved away, about the distance of a bow shot. She sat down alone. "Do not let me watch the boy die," she cried. Her strength was gone. Her water was gone. Her hope was gone. Hagar lifted her voice and wept. The wilderness seemed empty. Abraham was far away. Sarah would not come. There were no servants searching for them. No caravan appeared on the horizon. But Hagar had not escaped the sight of God. The boy cried, and God heard him. The angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. "What is the matter, Hagar?" The question was not asked because God lacked information. It invited Hagar to recognize that she had been seen. "Do not be afraid," the angel said. "God has heard the boy crying as he lies there." The name Ishmael means God hears. At his birth, the name had declared that God heard Hagar's suffering. Now in the wilderness, the meaning of his name became real again. God heard. Not only the prayers spoken in worship, not only the words of patriarchs and prophets. God heard the cry of a desperate boy beneath a bush. He heard the weeping of a rejected woman in the wilderness. "Lift the boy up," the angel said, "and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened Hagar's eyes. She saw a well of water. The well may have been nearby all along. Fear and grief had prevented her from seeing it. Hagar filled the skin. She gave Ishmael a drink. Life returned to the boy. The wilderness that had seemed like the place of death became the place where God preserved them. God was with Ishmael as he grew. He lived in the wilderness. He became an archer. His mother found a wife for him from Egypt, the land of her origin. The promise concerning Ishmael continued. He would not carry the covenant line of Isaac, but he would not disappear. God had spoken blessing over him, and God kept that word as well. This part of the story reveals something essential about the character of God. Election does not mean indifference. God chose Isaac for a specific covenant purpose, but he still saw Hagar. He still heard Ishmael. He still provided water. He still protected the boy. He still gave him a future. The household of Abraham had been broken by human decisions, jealousy, and fear. Yet even within the consequences of those failures, God remained compassionate. Isaac's birth was more than the happy ending to a family's long struggle with infertility. It was a turning point in the unfolding plan of God. Through Isaac, the covenant promises given to Abraham would continue. Isaac would later become the father of Jacob. Jacob would receive the name Israel. From Jacob's 12 sons would come the tribes of Israel. Through that nation would come priests, kings, prophets, and the scriptures. And eventually, through the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promised Messiah would enter the world. When God said that all the nations of the earth would be blessed through Abraham, the promise reached far beyond the immediate happiness of one elderly couple. Isaac was part of a plan that would unfold across centuries. His birth declared that God was guiding history toward redemption. This is why the manner of his birth mattered. The covenant people would begin not through human strength, but through divine promise. From the beginning, Israel's existence would testify that God gives life where there is no life. Later, the Apostle Paul would reflect on Abraham's faith. He would describe Abraham as one who believed in the God who gives life to the dead and calls into existence things that do not exist. Abraham considered his own body as good as dead, since he was about 100 years old. He also considered the deadness of Sarah's womb. Yet he grew strong in faith and gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. This does not mean Abraham never struggled. The book of Genesis records his fear, his laughter, his mistakes, and his attempts to create his own solution. Biblical faith is not the story of flawless human beings. It is the story of a flawless God remaining faithful to imperfect people. Abraham's faith survived because God continued to reveal himself. Sarah's laughter became joy because God acted despite her doubt. Isaac lived because the promise rested on God's ability, not theirs. The birth of Isaac teaches that God's delay is not God's denial. But this truth must be understood carefully. It does not mean that every human desire will eventually be fulfilled in exactly the way we want. It does not mean every person who waits for a child will receive the same miracle Sarah received. It does not mean every illness will be healed in this life, or every lost opportunity will return. The promise to Abraham and Sarah was a specific covenant promise given by God for his redemptive purpose. But the character revealed through that promise belongs to every generation. God is faithful. God is not careless with his word. God is not defeated by human weakness. God does not forget those who wait for him.
And when God has truly spoken, no power in heaven or on earth can prevent his purpose from being fulfilled. Sometimes God acts quickly. Sometimes he allows years to pass. Sometimes his answer takes a form we did not expect. Sometimes his fulfillment is greater than the request we first made. Sometimes we understand his timing only after the season has ended. And sometimes we must continue trusting without receiving every explanation. Abraham and Sarah had to learn that God's appointed time was not controlled by their impatience. When they tried to produce the promise through Hagar, they created pain that affected generations. But even their mistake could not destroy the covenant. God corrected them. He clarified his plan. He cared for those who were hurt, and he continued moving history toward Isaac. There is both warning and comfort in this. The warning is that forcing what God has not yet given can create consequences. Fear can push us into decisions that look practical but do not reflect trust. Impatience can make us grasp for control. We may attempt to create an Ishmael because waiting for Isaac feels unbearable. We may settle for what we can produce rather than trusting what God has promised. But the comfort is that our failures do not surprise God. Abraham's mistake did not erase the promise. Sarah's harshness did not cause God to abandon his plan. Hagar's rejection did not remove her from God's sight. Ishmael's departure did not place him beyond God's hearing. God worked through a family marked by weakness, conflict, and regret. The covenant continued because grace was greater than their failure. Laughter is woven through the story of Isaac. Abraham laughed when he heard that Sarah would have a son. Sarah laughed when she heard the promise from inside the tent. The child was named Isaac, meaning laughter. Sarah then declared that God had brought her laughter. Later, Ishmael's laughter or mocking became the cause of conflict. The same human expression carried doubt, joy, and hostility. But the central transformation belongs to Sarah. At first, Sarah laughed because she believed the promise could not be true. Her laughter protected her from disappointment. It was easier to laugh than to hope again. Hope had hurt her before. She had waited too long. Her body had changed too much. The promise seemed almost cruel when measured against her reality. Many people understand that kind of laughter. It is the smile used to hide pain. It is the quiet response of someone who no longer wants to be vulnerable.
It is the voice that says, "That will never happen," because believing again feels too dangerous. Sarah's doubt did not come from ignorance. It came from a lifetime of disappointment. But God did not leave her there. He brought her from hidden laughter inside the tent to open laughter while holding her son. The circumstances that once made the promise seem ridiculous became the circumstances that made the miracle unmistakable. Sarah's age was not an obstacle God had forgotten to consider. It was part of the testimony. The weakness she wanted removed became the place where God displayed His strength. The long delay she could not understand became the background against which His faithfulness shone most clearly. When Sarah looked at Isaac, she could not take credit. She could not say her strength had produced him. She could not say her plan had succeeded. Isaac was grace in human form. Every time she spoke his name, she remembered the distance between her doubt and God's faithfulness. Isaac, he laughs. Her household laughed with her. Future generations remembered her laughter. And the world learned that God is not limited by what appears impossible. God told Abraham that Sarah would bear a son at the appointed time. That phrase is essential. The birth of Isaac did not happen randomly. It was not merely delayed until God finally decided to act. The time was appointed. The schedule existed within the wisdom of God even when Abraham and Sarah could not see it. Human beings often measure the goodness of timing by personal comfort. If the answer comes quickly, we call the timing good. If it comes slowly, we call the timing cruel. But we see only a small part of the story. God sees the whole. He saw Abraham's journey from Ur. He saw the generations that would follow Isaac. He saw Jacob, Joseph, Moses, David, and the prophets. He saw the nation that would emerge. He saw the coming of Christ. The birth of one child was connected to a plan far larger than Abraham and Sarah could imagine. The delay was not meaningless. It ensured that Isaac would be recognized as the child of promise. It separated the covenant from human ability. It taught Abraham the nature of faith. It exposed Sarah's pain and transformed her laughter. It revealed God as the one who gives life where human strength has ended. We may not know why certain answers are delayed. We may never receive a complete explanation for every season of waiting. But Isaac's story teaches us not to confuse silence with absence. God had not been absent during the years Sarah remained barren.
He was not absent while Abraham grew old. He was not absent when they made mistakes. He was not absent when Hagar suffered. He was not absent when Ishmael cried in the wilderness. God was present in every chapter, even when His purpose was hidden. The God of the promise was also the God of the process. He was shaping Abraham's faith. He was exposing human attempts at control. He was protecting the covenant. He was caring for those wounded by the family's decisions. He was bringing every person toward the moment He had appointed. Then, when the time arrived, the promise came with complete precision. The Lord was gracious to Sarah as He had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what He had promised. As He had said, what He had promised. Those words summarize the entire story. God did not improvise. He fulfilled. He did not forget. He remembered. He did not fail. He acted. There may be something in your life that feels too late. A prayer you once prayed with confidence has become difficult to speak. A door you expected to open has remained closed. A dream you carried has grown old. Perhaps you have watched other people receive what you hoped for while your own season remained unchanged. Perhaps you have begun to laugh at the possibility that anything could be different. The story of Isaac does not promise that every desire will be fulfilled exactly as we imagine, but it does invite us to ask the question God asks Sarah: is anything too hard for the Lord? Your weakness is not greater than His strength. Your age is not beyond His authority. Your failure has not surprised Him. Your wilderness has not hidden you from His sight. Your tears have not passed unheard. The God who saw Sarah inside the tent also saw Hagar in the wilderness. The God who fulfilled the covenant through Isaac also preserved Ishmael beneath the bush. The God who confronted doubt also showed compassion. The God who allowed the waiting was still present throughout the waiting. Abraham and Sarah could not force the promise. They could not earn it. They could not produce it through their own strength. They could only receive it when the appointed time arrived. And when Isaac was finally born, every year of impossibility became part of the testimony. Sarah held the child and laughed. Not because life had always been easy, not because she had never doubted, not because every decision had been wise. She laughed because God had done what only God could do. The child in her arms was living proof that the word of the Lord had not failed. Generations later, people would still speak of Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac. They would remember the stars. They would remember the covenant. They would remember the old man who became a father. They would remember the barren woman who became a mother. And they would remember the God who brought life out of impossibility. The promise had waited. The promise had been tested. The promise had seemed beyond hope. But the promise had not died. Isaac was born, and the laughter of doubt became the laughter of joy. But the story of Abraham and Isaac was far from over. The promised child would grow. The boy whom Abraham had waited decades to receive would become the center of the greatest test of his life. One day, God would call Abraham's name, Abraham, and Abraham would answer, "Here I am." Then would come a command so painful and so difficult that it would seem to threaten everything God had promised. "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah." Abraham had trusted God to give life when there was no hope. Now he would be asked to trust God when the promise itself seemed to be placed upon an altar. A father, a son, a mountain, a knife, and a question that would echo through the centuries. Would Abraham trust the giver even when he could not understand what would happen to the gift? In the next episode of Bible Chronicles,